Picture this: the richest man alive, net worth bigger than the GDP of entire countries. Drop him into the middle of an ice age, no phone, no private jet, no security detail. Just him, his birthday suit, and a saber-toothed cat that has never once heard the phrase, "I'm going to sue you." Within 6 hours, he's dead. Probably from a bee sting? Because nothing in his trillion-dollar empire prepared him for a bee. Funny, right? Laugh. Go ahead. This is comedy. But stick with me, because the way he'd die is actually the most interesting part of this whole story. And by the end, you're going to realize his Stone Age failure and your Tuesday afternoon failure might be exactly the same failure. Let's get into it. Here's the twist most people get backwards. We assume smart means good at surviving. We assume the guy who can build a rocket that lands itself on a floating barge could obviously figure out how to start a fire. Wrong, dead wrong, literally. Survival in the Paleolithic. That's the long prehistoric stretch before farming, when every single human on Earth lived as a hunter-gatherer. Wasn't about individual genius. It wasn't about one guy with a big brain, a bigger ego, and a personal mission to colonize the next valley over. It was about something our billionaire has spent decades publicly, proudly, aggressively avoiding: cooperation. And maybe shutting up once in a while. So let's talk evidence, because this isn't just vibes. This is bones, caves, and decades of fieldwork. In 1963, anthropologist Richard Lee moved in with the Jew/Hwanzi people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa. Quick decode: the Jew/Hwanzi are one of the oldest continuously surviving hunter-gatherer cultures on the planet, and the Kalahari is a massive, brutal desert. What Lee found broke a lot of assumptions back home. These people, who outsiders had been calling primitive for decades, spent roughly 15 hours a week getting food. 15. That's less than most people spend doom scrolling. The rest of the time? Resting, talking, gossiping about whose husband was flirting with whose wife. Sound familiar? Decades later, anthropologist James Sussman dug even deeper into this, and he found something that should make our billionaire sweat through his, well, he wouldn't have a shirt, so let's say sweat through his loincloth. In these societies, bragging isn't just unpopular, it's borderline criminal. If you kill a big animal and strut back into camp like a conquering hero, people mock you. Anthropologists call it insulting the meat, deliberately talking down your own kill so nobody ever gets too impressed with themselves. Now imagine a culture that has a built-in automatic social defense system against a man who, in our world, would post, "Just shot the biggest antelope in human history. More updates soon. Big things coming." With a rocket emoji. That culture would eat him alive. Socially speaking, possibly literally if the antelope was disappointing. There's a third piece of evidence, and this one's written in firelight. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied the Jew Hwanzi too, but she zoomed in on something specific: what people talk about after dark. During the day, conversation was practical: who owes food, where the herds are moving, basic logistics. But at night around the fire, roughly 80% of conversation shifted to stories, myths, jokes, gossip about distant relatives nobody had seen in years. Wiesner's argument was that this wasn't just entertainment to pass the time before bed. It was social software. It synced everyone's values. It built the web of trust and obligation you'd desperately need later, when a lion eats your favorite spear and you need to borrow one. So here's the scoreboard so far. Fire maintained communally. Food shared, sometimes by law of social survival. Status, actively, aggressively flattened by the entire group. None of that requires $1 trillion. All of it requires something money cannot buy, rent, or acquire in a hostile takeover: a reputation for not being an asshole. Okay, let's actually rebuild a day. Your billionaire dropped buck naked into roughly 30,000 years ago, somewhere in what's now southern France. Sunrise. He's freezing. And here's the part that applies to you too, watching this on your couch. Your body, every human body, is built for a much warmer baseline than you think. We lost most of our fur a very long time ago. Without clothing or fire, hypothermia sets in within hours, even in mild weather. Your body is currently a tropical animal wearing a coat made of regret and central heating. He tries to make fire. He's seen it done. Rub two sticks together, right? How hard can it be? 2 hours later, his palms are raw, there's smoke, but zero flame. And he's muttering something about first principles to a pile of damp moss that is actively judging him. A group of actual local humans walks by, calmly, carrying fire with them, a smoldering bundle of moss tucked in a horn or shell, kept alive for days, sometimes weeks, because fire wasn't reinvented every morning. It was maintained, passed hand to hand, a multi-generational group project with zero patents and zero shareholders. He tries to negotiate, he offers them nothing because money doesn't exist, and even if it did, you cannot eat a stock certificate. You cannot eat equity. You cannot, and I cannot stress this enough, eat a rocket. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. If this group behaves anything like the ones Richard Lee documented, there's a real chance they'd help him anyway. Not because he's impressive, because helping a desperate, harmless stranger was itself a kind of investment. You help this guy today, and maybe 3 valleys over next winter, your cousin gets helped by strangers too. Anthropologists call this reciprocal altruism, which is just a fancy way of saying, I scratch your back. The universe eventually awkwardly scratches mine. But there's a catch, a big one. He has to behave. He can't start optimizing their hunting routes within an hour of arrival. He can't look at their fire setup and say it's inefficient. And he absolutely, under no circumstances, can comment on the cave art. And yes, Gethin, there is real cave art to comment on. Chauvet Cave in France contains paintings over 30,000 years old, depicting horses, lions, and rhinos with such skill and movement that when it was discovered in 1994, some researchers initially suspected a hoax. It was simply too good to be that old. If our guy walks in, looks at a 30,000-year-old painted horse and says it lacks scalability, or could use a logo redesign, that's it. He's done. Not because anyone's offended on principle, because a group that's small literally cannot afford to feed, clothe, and protect a member who generates more social friction than calories. This isn't theory. Studies of small-scale societies, past and present, repeatedly show the same pattern. Chronic free riders, bullies, and people who refuse to share don't get a stern talking to from HR. They get quietly abandoned, exiled, or in some documented cases, removed by group consensus. Permanently. Harsh? Maybe. But remember, there's no police force, no insurance, no GoFundMe. The group is the entire safety net for absolutely everyone, all the time. And now, the part that should genuinely surprise you. You'd assume farming, agriculture was the glow up. The moment humans got smart and finally settled down to build something permanent. It wasn't. Not for the average human body, anyway. Skeletal evidence from early farming communities tells a pretty grim story. People got shorter. Bones show more malnutrition, more infectious disease, because now you're living crammed together with your animals and your own waste, and more repetitive stress damage from grinding grain day after day for an entire lifetime. Hunter gatherers, by comparison, based on both ancient skeletal remains and studies of modern foraging groups, often had more varied diets, far fewer working hours, and frequently better overall health. So, why did farming win? Why does literally everyone you know live in a farming descended society? Because farming produces surplus, and surplus can be stored, hoarded, controlled, taxed. Surplus is the birth of owning more than you could ever possibly need. Surplus is, in a very real sense, the great 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 grandparent of the $1 trillion fortune. Agriculture wasn't an upgrade for the human body. It was a trap that produced more total food, more total people, and eventually concentrated obscene amounts of power into the hands of a very small number of people sitting at the top. Here's the thing about our $1 trillion friend: his entire identity, his entire brand, is built on the logic that came after agriculture: more, bigger, scale, optimize everything, colonize Mars because, in his words, Earth is just the starter planet. But the body he's walking around in, your body too, by the way, is still running roughly 300,000-year-old hardware. Your brain still rewards you with actual measurable dopamine for sharing food, for laughing with people around a warm glow at night, for gossip, for stories. You scroll social media for basically the same reason the Zhu Huanxi sat around the fire after dark. You are hardwired to crave stories about other people. The only difference is that the platforms weaponized that craving and quietly removed the part where afterward, everyone has to actually take care of each other. Our billionaire die because every single skill that made him rich, dominate, optimize, scale, win, post, is almost the exact opposite of the skill set that kept humans alive for 95% of our species' entire existence. Share, listen, joke, belong. Don't be a dick about the cave paintings, so picture it one more time. The richest man alive, dropped into an ice age, naked, freezing, about to meet a bee that has never once heard the phrase, "I'm going to sue you." Except now you know the punchline isn't really that he can't make fire. It's that fire was never the point. Fire was just the excuse everyone needed to sit close enough, for long enough in the dark to actually talk to each other. And somewhere right now, you're sitting in the glow of a different kind of fire. Small, blue, rectangular, scrolling alone, surrounded by people who would absolutely help you survive an ice age if you ever put the screen down long enough to ask.